Mahajanapadas and Rise of Kingdoms, 600 to 322 BCE. Chapter 1 The land that we now call India was, in 600 BCE, a vast and restless canvas upon which the first great kingdoms of the subcontinent began to paint their mark. Rivers flowed like veins of destiny, the Ganga, the Yamuna, the Godavari, the Narmada, each carrying not just water but whispers of trade, of ritual, of blood spilled and thrones won. The forests were deep, alive with tigers and elephants, yet beyond their shadows lay cities beginning to breathe with ambition. A change was coming, one that would break the age of tribes and clans, and replace it with states built on armies, laws, and taxes. This was the dawn of the Mahajanapadas, 16 great realms that rose out of chaos like jewels scattered across the Indian soil, each dreaming of supremacy, each plotting against its neighbor. Imagine walking through the bazaars of Varanasi where silk merchants from the east haggled with traders from the west, while priests chanted in the background and farmers carried baskets of rice. Picture the tense councils of kings as ministers whispered of spies, of alliances, of betrayals. This was no longer a land of wandering chieftains alone, it was becoming a chessboard of power, where every piece, king, soldier, monk, or merchant, had a role in shaping destiny. Yet, before the grandeur of kingdoms, let us not forget the mystery of the transition. The Vedic world had been guided by fire altars, by songs to Indra and Agni, by sacrifices that promised rain and victory. But as population swelled and iron plows tore deeper into fertile earth, the old ways bent under new needs. Fields stretched wider, harvests grew heavier, trade routes expanded farther, and wealth demanded protection. A simple chieftain could no longer hold sway over such complexities, order required something larger, kings with standing armies, cities with fortifications, bureaucracies to count coin and grain. Thus the Janapadas, the tribal footholds of clans, began to merge, expand, and transform into Mahajanapadas, the great realms. 16 of them, spread from the Gandhara valleys near present-day Pakistan to the rice fields of Bengal, from the mountains of Avanti to the sacred plains of Magadha. Each carried its own culture, its own gods, its own rivalries, yet together they were caught in the same storm of transformation. In their story we see the roots of India's first empires, and in their intrigues we glimpse the eternal dance of ambition and morality. Think of it, while Greece was raising its city-states, while China was consolidating under the Zhou, here too a civilization was weaving kingdoms upon the loom of destiny. And within these 16 realms, figures would arise, not only kings but prophets, not only warriors but seekers of truth, Buddha in Kapilavastu, Mahavira and Vaishali, visionaries who would shape the very foundation of power with nothing but words. The Mahajanapadas were crucibles of ideas, of wars, of philosophies. Chapter 2. By the time the smoke of countless sacrificial fires began to fade and the echoes of the Rigvedic chants softened into memory, the world of the Aryans was no longer confined to scattered clans and wandering cattle. Across the great northern plains, settlements had swollen into towns, towns into fortified cities, and kings into overlords commanding thousands. It was in this restless landscape that the Mahajanapadas rose like mighty pillars, 16 vast realms stretching their shadows across the subcontinent. They were not born in peace but in struggle, forged out of rival tribes, stitched together by conquest, and maintained by constant vigilance. Gandhara, with its capital at Taxila, sat like a sentinel at the crossroads of Central Asia, where Persian merchants, Greek adventurers, and Indian traders all passed, leaving behind ideas as much as goods. Avanti, rich and ambitious, dominated the Malwa Plateau, its twin capitals Ujjain and Mahishmati thriving as centers of art, wealth, and military power. Kosala, lying beside the sacred Sarayana, was both fertile and fierce, with kings who claimed descent from the solar dynasty of Rama, eager to wield their lineage as a weapon of legitimacy. Vatsa, centered at Kausambi, prospered from the Ganga's trade routes and boasted scholars, courtesans, and merchants in equal measure. Unga, on the eastern frontier, rose to wealth through its iron mines, its warriors feared for their weapons. And Magadha, Magadha was the sleeping lion, fertile and iron-rich, surrounded by rivers, destined to awaken and devour them all. Yet it was not alone. The republics of Vijay and Malla stood proud in the north, where tribes ruled not by kings but by councils, a bold experiment in collective governance. Kashi, once mighty, fought constantly with Kosala for dominance of the Ganga plains. Panchala, Matsya, Chedi, Cambodia, Ashmaka, Sharasainya, each with its own banners, its own wars, its own ambitions, crowded the chessboard of destiny. Together, these 16 Mahajanapadas were like sparks in dry grass, each capable of igniting a fire that could consume the land. Yet the grandeur of these realms was matched by their fragility, for beneath the crowns and councils simmered the ceaseless hunger for expansion. Armies marched across borders almost yearly, fortresses were razed, cities rebuilt, alliances broken with the speed of dawn mist. The citizens bore the weight of these ambitions, for with each conquest came new taxes, with each lost battle came plunder. But prosperity too was real. Markets bustled with cloth from Varanasi, salt from Rajputana, horses from the northwest, and rice from Magadha. Craftsmen carved ivory, potters shaped painted wares, blacksmiths forged iron plows that fed the swelling populations. Alongside this material wealth, ideas bloomed like lotuses on the waters. From the forests arose ascetics who denounced kings and rituals, wandering barefoot, seeking liberation not in sacrifice but in silence. Chapter 3, The 16 Mahajanapadas. In the centuries following 600 BCE, the landscape of northern India transformed into a dazzling, turbulent chessboard of kingdoms, each one vying for power, prestige, and survival. These were the Mahajanapadas, the 16 great realms that arose from the fertile river valleys, trade routes, and tribal republics of the subcontinent. Imagine a vast expanse stretching from the rugged Gandhara in the northwest, where caravans from Central Asia entered India, to the fertile delta of Ganga in the east where the Ganga fed lush rice fields. From the mighty coastal line Kashi in the heart of the Gangetic Plains, to Avanti in central India, to the distant Cambodia beyond the Himalayas, each Mahajanapada was like a shining jewel, some glittering with wealth and armies, others fragile, caught in the shadow of rising powers. Together, they made up a world that was both interconnected and fragmented, where trade linked cities yet wars split families, where kings held court with pomp yet spies whispered in the shadows, where every sunrise brought the promise of conquest and the threat of ruin. The word Janapada itself means foothold of a tribe, but by this time these tribal settlements had grown into powerful states, some monarchies led by kings with iron fists, others oligarchic republics where clans debated and ruled collectively. But the truth remained, the stronger swallowed the weaker, and history was merciless. Let us journey. In the northwest stood Gandhara, the land of crossroads, where Indian culture met Persian, Greek, and Central Asian ideas. Its capital, Taxila, would later become one of the world's greatest centers of learning, but even now it was a thriving hub of traders, horsemen, and storytellers. Wars erupted constantly between these states. Kashi and Kosala clashed for supremacy. The Ganga Valley became the heart of political drama, where rivers carried both trade and armies. Yet beneath the clash of swords and the march of elephants, deeper currents were stirring. These were the lands where Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, would soon walk, preaching renunciation in an age of greed and violence. These were the republics where Mahavira, the great teacher of Jainism, would challenge kings and priests with his message of truth and non-violence. And these were the kingdoms that, despite all their splendor, would ultimately fade, leaving only a handful, Kosala, Avanti, Vatsa, and above all, Magadha, to carry the torch into the next era. The Mahajanapadas were not merely 16 names in a list, they were living, breathing experiments in governance, ambition, and destiny. Their wars shaped borders, their trade enriched cities, their thinkers shaped religions, and their fall prepared the way for empire. In their rise and decline, we see the eternal cycle of history, where power dazzles but never lasts, where every crown trembles, and where out of the chaos of many states, one destiny emerges to unite them all. Chapter 4, The Rise of Magadha. In the great political theater of the Mahajanapadas, none shone brighter, fiercer, or more enduring than Magadha. Nestled in the fertile plains of the lower Ganga Valley, enriched by iron deposits from the Chota Nagpur Plateau, surrounded by rivers like the Sun and the Ganga that made agriculture bountiful and trade routes accessible, Magadha stood not just as a kingdom, but as destiny itself. While other Mahajanapadas fought their wars of pride and perished in the vanity of glory, Magadha grew quietly, steadily, like a flame waiting to become a raging inferno. The secret of Magadha's rise was not just geography, though its fertile lands and iron-rich soil gave it strong weapons and stronger soldiers. It was also the vision of rulers who dared to dream beyond their borders. Among the earliest architects of the stream was King Bimbisara of the Haryanka dynasty, who reigned in the 6th century BCE. Unlike kings who merely fought battles, Bimbisara used diplomacy like a sharpened blade. He married wisely, princesses from Kosala, like Chavi, and Madra, to build alliances instead of enemies. Yet even kings are not immortal. Bimbisara met a tragic fate, murdered by his own son, Ajatashatru, who hungered for power. Ajatashatru's reign, however, would mark the true turning point in Magadha's destiny. Ruthless yet brilliant, He waged fierce wars against Kosala and the powerful confederacy of the Vedi, where the Republic of Lycabas flourished. To defeat them, he used not only elephants and infantry but also cunning new inventions like catapults and covered chariots with blades. After a long and bloody struggle, Ajatashatru crushed the Vedi confederacy, proving that even the strongest republics could fall before Magadha's might. But Magadha's rise was not carved by blood alone. During this very age, the voice of the Buddha and the vision of Mahabharata echoed across its lands. It was in Rajagriha that the Buddha preached, in Magadha that Jainism flourished, and in Pataliputra, later built by Ajatashatru's successors, that these faiths found royal patronage. Thus Magadha became not only the sword of conquest but also the cradle of ideas that transformed Indian civilization. The successors of Ajatashatru, the Shishunagas and then the Nandas, would only build upon this foundation. From 16 kingdoms, the number dwindled to 4, Magadha, Avanti, Kosala, and Vatsa, and soon only Magadha remained supreme. By the 4th century BCE, when Alexander's gaze fell upon India's frontiers, it was Magadha that stood as the towering colossus of the Ganga plains. The rise of Magadha was no accident of history. It was the fusion of fertile land, iron weapons, ambitious rulers, clever diplomacy, ruthless warfare, and the spirit of new religions that gave voice to the people. In its rise, one could already see the shadow of a greater empire waiting in the wings, the Mauryan Empire, which would unite India like never before. Chapter 5, Life in the Mahajanapadas. Beyond the thundering clash of armies and the rise and fall of kingdoms, the true essence of the Mahajanapada era lay in the everyday life of its people. The story of India in this period was not written only in the palaces of kings but also in the fields of farmers, the workshops of craftsmen, the buzzing markets of towns, and the spiritual journeys of wandering monks. Agriculture was the backbone of life. Farmers cultivated rice, wheat, sugarcane, pulses. The invention and widespread use of the iron plowshare made farming more efficient, expanding cultivation into dense forests. Villages thrived, not as isolated spots, but as the beating heart of kingdoms, feeding soldiers, sustaining markets, and filling royal treasuries. Taxes, often in the form of grain, were collected from these farmers, ensuring that kings could maintain their armies and build cities. Trade too reached new heights. The Mahajanapadas were stitched together by networks of roads, rivers, and caravan routes. From the Ganga Valley to distant lands, goods like textiles, salt, spices, ivory, and jewelry moved in bustling exchanges. Urban centers such as Rajagriha, Kaushambi, Ujjain, and later Pataliputra became magnets of wealth, where merchants and artisans shaped an early spirit of urban life. Society itself was undergoing a transformation. The Varna system, already in place, became sharper. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras lived in a world defined by duty and hierarchy. Yet, alongside this structure, voices of dissent grew louder. The teachings of Mahabharata and the Buddha challenged ritual dominance, preaching equality, compassion, and renunciation. Religion and philosophy were deeply woven into daily life. While yajnas and sacrifices remained central to Vedic traditions, a parallel spiritual revolution was underway. Buddhism and Jainism attracted not only kings but also merchants and farmers, offering simpler paths of truth and liberation. Amidst all this, culture flourished. From music and dance in royal courts to folk traditions in villages, life was colorful and vibrant. Stories and epics began to take shape, passed orally from one generation to another. Conclusion: the Mahajanapada age was more than a chapter of wars and conquests, it was a laboratory of society, economy, and ideas. It laid the foundations of India's urban centers, trade networks, social structures, and spiritual thought. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient India, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel Rajya our Virasat. Your support keeps history alive. Tell us in the comments, what part of life in the Mahajanapadas fascinated you the most? Do you want to see more stories about daily life, kings and wars, or spiritual revolutions? Also, let us know what you liked, what could be improved, and what you'd love to see next. Your feedback shapes our next episodes.